So the class we're taking is it's a multicultural counseling class. There's about 12 of us in it at the moment, and we're just trying to go through different cultures that we're not maybe familiar with in order to try and, I guess, more familiarize ourselves with it, and
Okay.
maybe try and see from different perspectives any potential issues or maybe conflicts or biases that we may encounter in future clients and ourselves. So I was wondering, since you have mental health experience, do you have any advice on that?
Great. Well, first of all, thank you for, for doing something like this, because it shows your interest in trying to understand and bridge the gap. Cultural competency is really important, and it is something that's critical for mental health providers to know about, because in many cases it can prevent care, right? If someone has predisposed ideas or biases, as you said, or just prejudices or just lacks understanding, they may not even feel comfortable to seek help. And so if we can somehow address those concerns, then we can hopefully encourage people to be more open to seeking out services. So I want to applaud you for doing something like this. As far as, some of the barriers for access of care that we've come across from our community, because it is something certainly we've witnessed and we've had to grapple with in our community, the immense stigma with mental health. When I started, for example, back in 2009, when we started our website, Mental Health for Muslims, I started with my cousin who's a clinical psychologist. And then I had a lot of experience in the community because there was such a stigma to seek professional help. They would seek out people like myself or other religious leaders in the community, assuming that whatever they were going through, whether it was their own personal struggles with anxiety, depression, things that we knew symptomatically had, we already knew how to define those things, but because of their lack of knowledge of these were mental health issues, they assumed that they were spiritual crises. So that is, for the Muslim community, a big issue where a lot of people self-diagnose and presume falsely that what they're presenting is a lack of spirituality. There's a disconnect there. So they sometimes are so turned off by the idea of actually seeking professional help because in their worldview, that's just not a possibility. It has to be a spiritual explanation for why I'm sad and depressed. Maybe I should pray more. Maybe God is not happy with me. So they'll make all these deductions, which are, of course, most of the time there's no basis to them other than their own lack of awareness. So we found that that's a big challenge, where a lot of times the stigma to mental health is that people associate that you have, it's unfortunate, but there are a lot of people who equate mental health issues with some intelligent deficiencies or other character quality deficiencies, not realizing that it's just the same as if you had a health problem. You wouldn't presume anything about a person's character or their who they are if they had a health issue. But unfortunately, when it comes to mental health, that's the stigma, right? Like, oh, that person is not well, they're crazy, God forbid. They use these sort of terms that are really just not right at all. But that's the conclusion that's often made, that mental health means that someone's not right and they're almost irreparable. So I don't want to associate myself with that at all. It has to be a spiritual issue that I can find a spiritual solution for. That's probably the biggest barrier that we've come across within our own community. But we have made some strides, because since we started that website in 2009, where there are very few practitioners and these conversations even in the community weren't really open, we have come like almost light years in the past, how many years now has it been, right? 11 or so years. I have seen in my own personal experience so many more conferences, events, programs at the mosque. Every Friday, you'll see family nights and programs where imams even and people who are typically, who in the past may not have been too open about this topic. Now it's a very common thing where mental health issues are brought up as community-wide, programming that is important for everybody to hear. So they'll put it, sometimes even in the Friday sermon, they'll have addresses that talk about domestic violence, substance abuse, depression, anxiety, all of the very common disorders that we're seeing on the rise as a people, as a species, right? They're addressing those to the community. So we have made some really great strides. We've also seen a huge surplus of more practitioners. There's more. There's something, I don't know if you're familiar with, but you may have heard of it. There's the Khalil Center, which is probably the leading national now organization of counselors that have offices all over the U.S. and they're branching out, I think, even into Canada, where they are really taking the lead in the discussions around mental health. It's basically a service center, but they have chapters throughout the U.S. and they provide services, mental health services to the community. So there are organizations like that and many others that have come up within just, I would say, the past 10 to 12 years. It's been really incredible to witness.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like it's really growing the support. So being hopefully new therapists or counselors, what could we do to help try and also bridge that gap so they feel accepted or they're able to receive help?
That's a great question. Again, I thank you for asking that question. I think there should be some sort of cultural competency training about Islam and Muslims first before someone even considers taking on Muslim clients, because the issues that do come up oftentimes are so enmeshed with their spiritual identity or their religious identity as Muslims. So it's very hard to divorce those things in a therapy session. And that's also one of the barriers that we found, is that people are reluctant to go to see non-Muslims because they think they're not going to understand what I'm going through or why this particular incident is affecting me the way they are, as opposed to a Muslim who at least has that context. They understand, right? So I think when you have just a very simple, primary, refresher about Islam, to know the beliefs, what the beliefs are, what the daily, life of a Muslim entails, will give, I think, the provider a really better lens to understand why certain things may affect their client that maybe is not understood by or seen in other people of different faiths and backgrounds. Because for Muslims, Islam is not just a religious identity that we ascribe to on certain days or around holidays, or we just kind of, it's a label or something that it's actually a lifestyle. So Islam very much affects everything that we do, all the choices that we make, our worldview. So if you don't have that understanding, then it might be difficult for you to understand why someone won't take your guidance on, well, have you tried this or have you tried that? Because in their particular worldview, that's just not an option. Like, for example, divorce. I as someone who's been doing spiritual counseling for a long time, for Muslims, keeping the marriage intact is so important. And we take marriage very, very seriously. Divorce is permissible in the event that the marriage is just not salvageable, but you really do try your best to save the relationship, especially when children are in the mix. So that is such an essential, belief that is very rooted in many Muslims in their just values. So if you have a practitioner who doesn't have that same understanding, and they will in the very first session suggest that maybe you should just dissolve the relationship. If it's like a counseling session, for example, you guys just don't seem very compatible, you fight a lot, there's too many other variables, finances, in-laws. And so if they just deduce quickly that maybe the marriage is just run out of, there's really no point, because in the Western or their context, it just seems like that's the most practical thing to do, then the client will likely feel like, okay, see, they're just quick to rush us to divorce. They don't really care about trying to really help us. And that is actually a very common complaint I've heard from Muslim clients who have gone to see non-Muslims. They always come back saying, no, they're too liberal-minded, or they don't have the same family values, same understanding of even in-laws. A big issue that you'll find if you ever are to have clients in the Muslim community are the families are very enmeshed in Muslim marriages. So it's not so simple to tell, or it's not easy to tell your client, well, you should just create boundaries with your mother-in-law and tell her not to come over. Those kind of things in our Western sensibilities, they make sense because it's like boundaries are very clear for us, and we're more empowered to have that sort of those lines, really clear. But for Muslims, it's very difficult because it will absolutely impact the entire marriage. You know, if you were to draw such clear lines with your mother-in-law or your father-in-law, it could potentially lead to a divorce. It's that serious, right? So I think having that knowledge that there's certain values that, you know, people of Muslim, you know, background, or whether, regardless of the culture, it's pretty shared because of their faith that they adhere to strictly. Therefore, I have to kind of adjust my tone or my approach to not just, you know, dismiss those things or to overlook those things in my in what I provide, in the service that I provide. So
Yeah, you've been mentioning a lot about family, and I know how important it is, but there's also, it seems like, almost a community like family within the faith itself. Like it may be separate from like the, you know, the family, but it still feels like that it's treated as kind of a larger family within the faith.
absolutely. That's a very, very on point. The community is we do see ourselves as a one large body, although we're definitely not a monolith. There's a lot of variety, but we are, it's part of our belief system to see ourselves as one body. So we call, for example, the Muslim community at large is called the Ummah, which is like a nation of Muslims. And so there's a lot of, you know, teachings in the faith that say that we should really try to strengthen our brotherhood, our sisterhood. So if you're part of a larger community wherever you live, yes, you see your community members as extended family members in many cases. And there is, of course, we have, you know, there's lines. I mean, it's not that they would know all of your private, you know, information. We're not like that, but it's to, you do take into consideration the larger impact of your choices and decisions as an individual on the community as well. We're not so separate that we just don't care. Like, for example, reputation is a very big deal, you know, in many of our Muslim cultures. Like, so a lot of people will take that into consideration. Like, how is the community going to view me, you know, if I take this decision or if I take this decision? So sometimes those factors are also really important in why they may choose to go one way or another. And if a provider isn't aware of that, and again, they give very Western ideas to people who are not defined by those ideas, it may cause just a lack of, you know, connection. And then you might not see that client again, because they just feel like, well, they don't get me. They're just giving me very Western perspectives about things. And I don't agree with that. That's not my philosophy, or that's not my viewpoint. So, but it can be, you know, bridged by just having more understanding and education about those things. Because I've actually sent friends of mine who didn't have success or couldn't find Muslim therapists in their area. We've done some research and looked for people who, in their, you know, description of their services, they actually do describe that they do have competency around certain cultures, and they found great success. Like, that person did their due diligence, or their, you know, they did their part to learn more about different cultures, and it did help the way that they were able to provide service. So I think it's so it is possible to do that.
Yeah. So in your experience, when you're dealing with clients, do you incorporate the family a lot more, or is it still kind of an isolated thing that you just kind of use your knowledge and experience as a background?
That's a good question. I always do like to know. I mean, it depends on the circumstance. I've worked with individuals. I've worked with, you know, actual families where the mother, the father, and the children are all kind of there, and then couples. So I think it just depends on each situation. But if I feel that there is some involvement, you know, meddlesome behavior, for example, in a marital context, then yes, I will want to know the you know, more specific details about the family and the relationship that the individuals have, because, you know, there are some filial piety, for example, in Islam is very important. It's one of the top you know, beliefs or tenets of the faith, is that we worship God, and we, you know, we have our own you know, there's a lot of ritualistic practice that we have, but one of the most important things that a Muslim must do or should do is to show reverence and respect to their parents. So that's a very big part of the Muslim, you know, mindset. So it's, you know, filial piety, just having that. So that can sometimes, though, pose, you know, issues when it comes to the marital relationship, because a spouse may be completely conflicted if they have a very overbearing parent who is dictating to them how they should be in their marriage and, you know, everything that they should be doing in their marriage because they don't have good boundaries, then the child or the spouse may feel really torn because they feel that they're doing something spiritually wrong, like if they go against their parent, right? So this is where someone like myself who has a spiritual background can actually give them a balanced view, that you don't have to pick your wife or your husband over your mom or dad, right? It doesn't have to be like that. You can actually have compromise, and maybe it's your mom or your dad that we need to bring them in and talk to them about, hey, listen, you know, we get that maybe you're having a really difficult time, you know, with your own personal situation, or because, you know, a lot of the older generation, they create some unhealthy codependencies sometimes because being here in a foreign land, not having their family from back home, they can create those codependencies with their children that get very unhealthy, and they're not aware of it. And so sometimes having a third person like myself, or maybe a religious leader who can come in and tell the mom and dad, like, listen, yes, you have rights in Islam and your children should be dutiful and respectful to you, but you also have to respect their boundaries. And this is what that entails. So we can help to kind of, you know, dissipate the situation that way. But there have certainly been instances where, yes, you have to involve the family if the relationship or the individual themselves, because there's been individual cases as well where the parents are just not understanding, you know, the conflict that their child has individually, and they need more education on mental health issues, for example, like depression, anxiety. What does that mean? How can you better help them to, you know, help themselves instead of, you know, just, you know, shaming or blaming or kind of getting into that negative space because you're frustrated with your child or you're frustrated with this individual. So sometimes it is necessary to get the family involved.
Well, you also mentioned using the imam with the parents as well. Is that something you would think would be, you know, acceptable in the mental health field to try and incorporate the spiritual leaders?
I think it's absolutely something to keep as an option in the event that you're dealing with people who are very religiously committed people, because, you know, they sometimes have that tunnel vision, or just, you know, they can't really see beyond what you're telling them. So to have an ally who's in the community, a religious leader who you can outsource when needed, or to bring into a mediation, for example, or some conversation to help to, you know, again, dispel certain false ideas, because there's sometimes just cultural things that get confused or passed on as religious ideas that an imam or even a female, you know, teacher could certainly elucidate and clarify that, listen, that's a cultural idea. That's not religious, right? So if you are concerned about your spiritual well-being or doing the right thing, let me just tell you that that practice is nothing to do with Islam, and it's actually just, you know, from your culture. So sometimes it can be very useful to a practitioner to have a person in that capacity to, you know, to help to outsource when needed, like I said. And I would definitely look to your community and see if there is an opportunity to create a relationship with the local mosque, where they might have existing counseling services, and you could even work with and pair up with providers from the mosque or from the community center to help with clients when you get them, or to just, you know, consult on certain issues. That's absolutely something I would recommend doing.
Okay. Well, and it's kind of in the same vein. Where could me and my classmates go to find more information so we can kind of further our understanding? I know you have the website, the mentalhealthformuslims.com. But what other resources do you think would be viable for us?
That's great. There's a lot of, I mean, you know, if we're talking specifically about learning about Islam, there's great, many different websites or organizations. One that comes to mind that I personally know and have worked with, and I think they do a phenomenal job of explaining a lot of the core beliefs of Muslims and Islam in a way that Westerners totally get and understand, because that's what they do, is an organization called the Islamic Networks Group. And they're actually based here in California, in the South Bay. I worked with them for a long time, but they have a national reach. They're in pretty much all the major cities. What they do is they provide trainings, actually, cultural competency trainings to all different institutions, hospitals, police stations, schools, universities, middle schools, like really everywhere, corporations, that have called on them, they will come and they will actually do presentations on or trainings that will give, you know, people more just general basic information about Islam, really bring them up to speed about a lot of the things that we talked about. And they also have great content on their website that you could, like, there's an FAQ, most commonly asked questions about Islam, a lot of things that people who have no idea about what Muslims believe in will get. And they work, the office itself, there's non-Muslims that work there. So it's a very interfaith, very American organization that is trying to make Islam more reachable, or, you know, more approachable for people who are outside the faith. So I think I can provide that in the chat. If you'd like their website, so you can look it up. But I think they have great resources on their website.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Well, another thing, just from calling down and writing to the local Leavenworth Center, there seems so open. They're welcome within, you know, a few hours. I got an email back, and then a phone call. So it was amazing to see how open it is, that we can just, if we have questions or we just want to clarify or anything, really. It's amazing.
Absolutely. And that's very much part of the Muslim tradition. Muslims generally don't, we don't do like missionary work, for example. We don't go out and we don't, you know, proselytize that way, but we do invite, and we're very open when people ask questions. Like, you could go to any mosque, and, you know, in terms of if your students or your fellow students were interested in observing, I'm sure they would arrange a meeting where you could, I mean, right now with COVID, it might be a little different, but post, you know, when things open up, or even online, they might have programs that are for the general community or for anybody to tune into. I'm sure they would be more than happy to give you access to that. And generally, that's the experience that a lot of people have. They're usually surprised, like, oh, wow, I could just go in and talk to people and sit and watch the prayers and nobody says anything. I'm like, yeah, because we have nothing to hide, and we're very proud of our faith. And, you know, if people are interested, we're very honored by that. So we're happy to accommodate. And even like with Munir and myself, we were very happy to, you know, talk to you, because it's actually really nice to have people who are interested in learning from sources, instead of just turning on news media or going to random places that speak for us, whereas we can speak for ourselves in these circumstances. So we're really happy to do that. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I know you got to get going here in a couple of minutes, but just want to say thank you. And do you have anything you would like to say to my classmates?
Well, first of all, again, I want to thank you, Eric, for coordinating this, and all of you for being so sensitive. I think really just having open conversations and not being, I know that, you know, I'm very American. I mean, I don't know if you can pick up, I hope, I mean, I didn't explain, but my background, although I was born in Afghanistan, I was really raised here. I have no memories of Afghanistan. So I very much consider myself American. And I think I know that part of American culture is political correctness. And we're sometimes so worried about offending people and like, oh, I don't want to ask too many questions, or, you know, it's religious, especially around beliefs, right? We don't want to, politics, beliefs, there's certain things we don't talk about openly in our society. But for Muslims, we actually really do welcome those questions. And I think you will find that experience, as we just said, across the board with Muslims. We're actually happy to answer questions. So feel like freer to do that. And I will make myself available for anybody who has follow-up questions to this interview. I can send you my email address. I do a lot of interfaith work. I speak publicly, nationally. So I'm very comfortable talking to people. I have no problem answering questions, even if you think like that's a dumb question, or should I even ask? Don't worry, you know, people about my hijab, about women's rights. I do entire presentations on women's rights in Islam. I talk about interfaith stuff. So there's really no topic that I would feel, you know, a little intimidated by to answer. So I think if they're interested, I can certainly make myself provide my contact information for specific questions, and also for resources, because our time is limited here. I don't have that off the top of my head, but I can make perhaps like a resource sheet with more resources for you, and even look to registries that I'm familiar with to see if there's something more to your locality that might help you in this regard. So I can do that as, you know, after this offline.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. Do you mind if I share I have your contact info, your email notes. Can I share that?
Oh yeah, sure. You know what, if I can give you actually this email address, the other one is for personal use, but the one that I'm posting right there, that's more for general. And I just, it helps me to filter, you know, between family and business and all the other stuff that I get. So yeah, this second email address is please feel free to share it with your students. and anything. I'm on line also. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. So people are on social media. My tag is the same, and I do write a lot. So I have a lot of talks that I give, but I also write a lot. So you can check out posts if you're interested, kind of seeing, different. And I write on mental health advocacy. So
That's perfect. I really appreciate this again.
Sure.
But I guess we'll wrap it up now since you got to get going here in 1 minute.
Yeah, in a couple of minutes, unless you had any final questions, I can stay on for a couple of minutes.
I don't really have any left over. But so one quick one then, because all of my classmates are female, and you're talking about females
Yes.
in Muslim community. I think a lot of times they're viewed as weak or maybe not as equal, but that's not true. And I was wondering if you could kind of teach on.
Sure. Well, I hope I'm an example of that we're definitely not shy, timid, and those are just tropes, and unfortunately the media has definitely stereotyped us down to just that. But if you actually study Islam or talk to Muslim women, you will see that couldn't be farther from the truth. We're very empowered because, looking at the history of Islam and Muslims 1400 plus years ago, you'll see that a lot of the rights that Western women and women in other civilizations and societies have received just in the past maybe 100 years or so, Muslim women were given those rights, centuries ago, the right to vote, the right to inherit, the right to work, the right to own property. A lot of those things were given to us. It was just part of our faith. So we've had that for centuries. So I think what we see though is cultural. So I come from a cultural, culture like Afghanistan, right? Where our introduction to Afghanistan happened after 9/11. It was put on the map, and the instant images you see are people wearing that they call the beekeepers blue the chador, right, which is an outfit that's traditional to the Afghan culture, and it actually predates even Islam. So people don't know that was just something that even after the liberation and the Taliban were dismantled and all of, the America and the troops and the Western troops entered, you will still go to many places in Afghanistan and the women still wear that. It's a cultural part of their identity. So it's not part of Islam, right? But things like that I think are really important for people to understand the difference between culture and the religion, because the religion itself is very liberating to women. And I could give you, the presentations I do, that's exactly what I do. I go over the history. I talk about historical figures. I talk about all of the rights that are in the scripture from both the Quran and the Hadith, which are the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, where we're showing clear example and evidence of the fact that women have always had rights in Islam. And it's just a matter of systems, right? Patriarchy is real, and it definitely is, in every corner of the world. And when you see those systems in place, then sure, it's going to present as though, the women may not have certain rights, but that's not from a religious standpoint. And that's why you see Western Muslim women very much more vocal, because they're not, under a lot of those systems, right? We can be more vocal here. So you find Muslim women, we have, Rashida Tlaib, we have Ilhan Omar, they're in politics, our first two Muslim women in political positions. So if we were really like the stereotypes in a lot of the Hollywood films and all of these other, areas where we don't speak and we can't do anything, we can't move without our husband's permission, you would not see so many up and coming women who are very strong, very vocal, very outspoken, who drive, who do things that, again, stereotypes may say otherwise, but we're proof that that's just not simply true. And those are unfortunately just, oppressive systems and government systems that are not in line with the faith. But the presentation I have is actually, I think it would be great. I don't know if there would be an opportunity, but if it's something you want to talk about offline, maybe we can share some of those notes more, with the whole class.